hear me? All right. First, I know some of you have heard this before, but we have a little public service announcement from the Bird City Committee first. Thank you for coming to today's World Migratory Bird Day celebration presented by the Bird City Algoma Committee. I'm Kathy Pavick, a member of the committee. The Bird City Algoma Committee works with the City of Algoma and other community groups to annually meet the requirements that earn Bird City, Wisconsin recognition for the City of Algoma. Offering a World Migratory Bird Day celebration is one of those requirements. So by attending today, you're all helping us earn that recognition. Please stop at our table near the entrance to the gym for more information and sign up to get our news. Donations are appreciated to support this free community event. And if you have ideas for next year's programming, there's a paper at the back of the room that you can enter your ideas. We always appreciate new ideas for programming in the coming year. So, welcome to Winged Wonders with Live Birds. The Raptor Education Group, Inc., or REGI for short, is an Antigo-based nonprofit founded in 1990 and dedicated to the care and rehabilitation of injured or orphaned native bird species and public education of wildlife issues. That's a big mission. Today, REGI takes in anywhere from 800 to over 1,000 patients each year and provides educational programs to hundreds of people. REGI holds permits from both the state of Wisconsin and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to possess threatened and endangered indigenous species for rehabilitation and educational purposes. Our presenter today is Cinna. Cinna was a REGI education intern last summer and is currently serving on the REGI education team as an AmeriCorps member after recently graduating from the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, with a degree in wildlife education. Congratulations, Cinna.
Thank you.
And also here today is Helper Fox, who is going to be chaperoning the birds around the room, I understand. And they're going to tell us about raptors, tell us their stories, and inform us about what we can do to make sure we remain a significant part of the ecosystem.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. All right. So as you heard, my name is Cinna, and this is Fox, and we are both with the Raptor Education Group in Antigo, Wisconsin. So a big part of what REGI does is rehabilitation, which is taking in injured, sick, or orphaned wild birds that are native to Wisconsin, and we try to fix them up and make them all better so that they can be released back into the wild and continue living their lives. Some of these birds are actually not able to be released back into the wild, and some of those birds that have special characteristics we actually keep and use on educational programs just like this one, so we can teach the public all about wildlife issues and what we can do to protect them. So these birds are very much not pets. We actually have special permits from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Wisconsin DNR in order to be able to legally have these birds. They are not pets, and they would be very much illegal for most people to keep as pets. So they are not potty trained as a result of being wild birds, so they are pretty much guaranteed going to poop on the floor. That's why we have this sheet down up in front, and we have some towels around just so we can clean any accidents up. And if you happen to see that one of them poop and we don't catch it right away, even though we're pretty much experts at cleaning up bird poop, can you just like raise your hand and point to it, just so we don't miss any? We don't want to create any slipping hazards, you know. All right. So Fox is getting our first avian ambassador that we are going to meet. And we like to start with this one because we think he really shows off the three characteristics that make a raptor a raptor. And if his head looks a little bit silly, it's because he was sleeping in the rain this morning, so his feathers were a little, he had some bedhead going on.
What are the characteristics that make a raptor a raptor? Find out. What is it?
And there is a feather stuck to his head. All right, so this here is a red-tailed hawk. Can anyone guess why he has called a red-tailed hawk? It's not a trick question, I promise. So that is because of their red tail, but they actually don't get splash zone.
There we go.
So they actually don't get their red tail until they are about 2 years old. So that is how we know that this red-tailed hawk is an adult. So we, unfortunately, because of our permits, we can't let anyone touch the birds or anyway, just because they are protected species, and that's kind of a privilege that lays to us for specifically medical reasons. But we do have some things that we can pass around so you can kind of feel what these birds would feel like. So we'll start with the red-tailed hawk. So I started off by saying that most of the time that's going to be the situation. They just fell, and you can put them back in and help them out. So we actually do have a nice handy-dandy flow chart over on that silver table over there for what to do if you find a baby bird. So if you want to take that home and just have it on hand for in case of emergencies, then you can feel free to after the program has ended. So what do you think you should do if you find a baby bird that is in some sort of trouble though? Like maybe it's been caught by a cat, or it's like shaking and it looks cold, something like that.
Call you.
Yep, call us. Fantastic answer. So we will be able to help you out with that if a baby bird is actually in trouble. All right, any questions about American kestrels? Yeah?
How far can they rotate their head?
How far can they rotate their head? That's a wonderful question, and I'm not sure of the exact measurement. It's definitely way farther than we can, but not quite as far as owls can. The reason that all birds are able to rotate their heads way further than we can is because they have a special gland that's like above their tail. I forgot what it's actually called. I just kind of call it their butt gland. But it's something that actually has a bunch of oils in it that they put on their feathers to make them waterproof. So they're able to like fly and not get really soggy in the brain. So they have to reach back and basically be able to reach and put that all over their feathers.
It's called the Europygial.
Europygial?
What?
Europygial. I struggle with the PTs sometimes. Any other questions about American kestrels or falcons in general?
Is the female of the kestrel bigger than the male?
They're also going to have that. So female kestrels will be larger than male kestrels too, also along with the feather difference.
So statistically, do the females are more of the bowl catchers because they would perhaps have the physical size enough to
Yep.
handle them?
That is, the question was, are they more of like bowl catchers, things like, do they catch different sizes of prey? And yes, that's actually one of the reasons that it's kind of hypothesized that raptors have this size difference. It's so the male and the female can catch different sizes of prey and bring it back to the nest. And the other is because generally the females spend more time on the eggs, so they need to have the body size to actually like cover those eggs.
Develop the eggs.
Yep. And something else really cool about falcons, just to fill the space while Fox is getting our next bird. They actually are not really closely related to other birds of prey in general. They're actually more closely related to parrots, which I just think is really cool. And it's like kind of convergent evolution is what happened there. Like they got the same traits to fill the same niche in general. So they have similar like bird of prey adaptations, but they actually aren't really super closely related. It just happened independently. So I think that's super cool.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, that's also why falcons have almost, it looks like a little fang on their beak. It's called a toenail tooth. It's just something that is left over from the parrot.
Oh. Oh.
She always gets lots of oohs and ahs. Right, so this here is a barn owl. Does anyone guess why they're called barn owls? Yeah? Yep, they do like living in barns. That's exactly where it comes from. So barn owls are known for living in places that humans have built but don't really use super often. So things like barns, church steeples, things like that are kind of isolated but have some nice structure to them. So farmers actually really like barn owls because they are an incredible form of pest control. So barn owls can eat up to 1,000 mice in a single year, which I don't think I could eat up to 1,000 mice in a single year, so that's pretty impressive. So they are an incredible form of natural pest control, but unfortunately the types of pest control that humans like to use has gotten them in some trouble. So things like rodenticide, so rat poison that is put out into the environment, it's not species specific, and predators like a barn owl or any other species of raptor, or any predator really, can be very easily poisoned if they pick something up that's eaten poison. So to predators, it's kind of natural for them to try to pick out the things that are sickly and slow, because that's just kind of how it's supposed to happen. But if a mouse has been poisoned, it's not going to die right away. It'll be really slow and sick and easy to capture for up to a week afterwards. So it'll make a really easy meal for a owl, especially a barn owl, because they eat lots and lots of mice and things that eat rodent poison. But unfortunately for that barn owl, that meal would probably be its last, because it would then be poisoned by the poisoned mouse. So because of both rat poison and habitat loss, barn owls are actually what we call extirpated from the state of Wisconsin, which basically means that they're locally extinct. So they used to be here, but they're not really found here anymore, just because of the two problems of rat poison and habitat loss. So people knocking down like old growth forests or old abandoned barns and things like that, it's just kind of wiped out any habitat that they have in the state. So this barn owl was actually captive bred at the World Bird Sanctuary in Missouri. And she was actually brought to us basically intentionally, so we had a barn owl to bring out and teach people about their struggles in Wisconsin and why they're really important to protect. So simple things like using snap traps instead of poison in the environment is just way better for the entire ecosystem, not just barn owls, because generally it's not ever really necessary to introduce poisons into the environment like that. So that said, this barn owl is actually a European barn owl, so she looks a little bit different than the ones that you're going to find in America. She's probably about half the size, and then she's a lot lighter in color. So can you all see that heart shape that's on her face? So that's actually called her facial disc. So if you would all like to cup your ears forward like this. Do you see how you can hear me a little bit better when you do that towards me? That's basically what owls' facial discs do for them all the time. So it's like a satellite dish that funnels sound directly into their ears. And then something else super cool about owl ears is they are not symmetrical. So our ears are one right across from each other, right? So imagine one of your ears is up here facing forward, and one of them is kind of down here facing backward. It'd probably look a little bit silly, right? But owls have that in order to basically be able to hear 360 degrees around them. So using their asymmetrical ears and their incredible facial discs, they can basically triangulate exactly where certain sounds are coming from in the environment. So when a bird is triangulating something, it basically means that it is using one ear as a one point on a triangle, and the other ear as another point on the triangle, and whatever is making sound like maybe the heartbeat of a mouse is the third point of the triangle, and that basically makes it so there's only one spot that sound could be coming from. Barn owls specifically actually have some of the best animal hearing that has ever been tested. They are basically one large ear, is what I like to say. So their facial disc is huge and really, really complex, and they just have incredible senses of hearing. They've actually been tested by being put in rooms that have no natural light and no artificial light, so like no windows, no light bulbs, no nothing, completely dark. And they have been able to completely successfully capture mice in those rooms just by using their hearing alone. So barn owls are able to hear mice heartbeats from under 18 inches of snow. So that's super cool. Yeah?
Do you have any of the sounds that these birds make, or can you imitate them just for fun?
I don't know if I could imitate a barn owl's call necessarily. It kind of sounds like the shrill scream of a woman, which actually is part of the reason that barn owls are thought to be the origin of a lot of different ghost stories. So that is in part because of that scream-like hoot. And the other part is because they like to nest in old places that humans kind of think of as creepy, like abandoned churches and barns that are falling apart are generally like a little bit haunted feeling in general already. But then people would go into them and hear what sounds like the shrill scream of a woman, and then a big white shape would fly over their head. So I'd also probably be out there, to be fair. Well, maybe when I was younger, but then now I would just be like an owl. Owls also have another incredible adaptation that we kind of hinted at earlier with how far they can turn their heads. And have you ever heard that owls can turn their heads all the way around? That's not exactly true. They can turn their heads really, really far, but it's only about 280 degrees. So we can turn our heads about 180 by like 90 degrees each way. So they can turn their heads 280 degrees, and basically, if I was an owl and if I could put my hand right here, if I was an owl, I would be able to turn my head this way and see my other hand on my shoulder. So they can't turn their head all the way around because they have a spinal cord, so they have to protect all the important stuff in there. But they can turn it really, really far. And part of the reason they have to do that is, okay, can you all do me a favor and hold your heads like completely still, but follow my finger with your eyes. So you can move your eyes in your head, right? Without moving your head itself. Owls can't do that. They actually have eyeballs that are literally held in place by these bony tube-like structures. So they literally cannot move their eyeballs when they're in their own heads. And this is a great horned owl skull. It'd be a little too large for an owl.
So the Zyzol commercials lie to us.
All right. Any questions about barn owls? Yeah.
If you were standing underneath a tree and the barn owl was above the tree, would the barn owl be able to feel talking?
Oh, definitely. They could hear you from way far away if you were talking. That barn owl could probably hear your heartbeat from under the tree.
Is this one of the species of owls that when they fly, you can barely hear their wings flapping?
Yep, that's pretty much all species of owls, and we're going to talk a little bit why about that with the next bird that we're meeting.
Okay.
But yeah. So you can barely hear them. That also contributes to the ghost stories. She would be very much illegal to have without a special permit for education. She's very distracted by the flag, I'm pretty sure. Hard to tell sometimes.
Oh my God.
So this is a northern saw-whet owl, and this is the smallest owl that you can find in all of Wisconsin. But not quite the entire world. That would belong to the pygmy or the elf owl, depending on who you ask. It gets complicated. So northern saw-whet owls are pretty common around here, but you're actually not going to see them much because they really like to avoid people. So they're going to be found in really dense old-growth forests with lots of really, really tall trees, and they are cavity nesters. So no owls really build their own nests. They'll all kind of find natural or man-made cavities, so things like nest boxes or old abandoned barn lofts, things like that. But they will nest in cavities up towards the very top of these really tall old trees. So they tend to not really want to be bothered by humans too much. They also have a I think it's very cute, and it kind of just sounds like, has anyone ever played the recorder? It sounds like doing a really high note on a recorder over and over again. So it's like a doot, 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 doot. And they don't really make that noise a lot out in nature. Can anyone guess why they wouldn't want to make a whole lot of noise?
Predators?
Yeah, I heard it from the audience, but it is indeed predators. So they don't really want to make a whole lot of noise because that would just basically be saying, hey, great horned owl out there, come and eat me, I'm a free snack. So they're pretty quiet out in the wild, so you're not really likely to hear them or see them. But if you ever hear a really high-pitched doot, 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 doot from the top of an old growth tree, then you may just be hearing a northern saw-whet owl. And you may be able to tell from their patterning, it is to help them camouflage into those trees up towards the top. So they almost look like tree bark, especially if you don't have super bright color vision like most owls. So they hide very well up in those trees. So all owls have one more adaptation that makes them incredible hunters, and that is the silent flight that we were asked about earlier. So you might want to take her off. Yeah. None of them really like when I do this. So if we could all be super quiet. Can anyone hear anything? You might be able to feel a gentle breeze down the front. But that is actually because owls have special feathers that have kind of this comb-like fringe on the end, and they're super soft. So I'll pass this around so everyone can get a feel of how soft owls are. But that actually helps to break up sound as it is passing over their wings. So that has two really important purposes. One is owls are ambush predators, so it means that they sit in one spot and wait for something to pass by, and then they'll fly down and grab it. So they don't want to make a whole lot of noise because that would then alert the prey that they're on their way and ready to snatch them up. So owls fly pretty slowly, relatively slowly for raptors. So they'll just fly slow, low to the ground, pick something up with their long legs, and be on their merry way. And that prey never stood a chance of hearing them coming. But the other one is because owls rely on their hearing a lot for hunting, so they don't want to be making all sorts of noise flapping their wings up right next to their super sensitive ears, otherwise they wouldn't be able to hear their prey anymore. So this northern saw-whet owl actually was brought into us as an owlet after we believe that her mother fed her and her siblings a poisoned mouse. So it was not something that that mother owl did on purpose by any means, but they can't really detect poison and things like that. And unfortunately, she fed this entire mouse to her youngins, and the entire nest was brought in with very severe poisoning, and this is the actual sole survivor of her nest. Her siblings were much more intensely poisoned, and we think that she basically lucked out because she was fed a smaller portion of that mouse.
Wow.
So
Where was that family?
I am not exactly sure what part of Wisconsin they came from. I want to say Wausau. Or Wausau area. The records, I would have to check back in the records for that one. So it is kind of unfortunate just because they were doing really well up until that point, until she stumbled across a poisoned mouse, and then it was basically just bad luck from there on out. But because of that, she actually has what we think is lasting immune system damage. So she's basically immunocompromised. So if she were to be released out into the wild, her immune system really isn't built at all, so it wouldn't be able to protect her from diseases or anything like that. So if she went out into the wild and encountered like a bacteria or a virus, she would probably get it just about right away, and she would get really sick pretty immediately.
Were they still nestlings?
They were still nestlings. Yeah.
Because a pygmy owl is maybe smaller than that too, but we're probably I've always wanted to see an elf owl. You go to Arizona all the time, but of course, no one sees them. But are they smaller than that?
Yes, that's why we don't say that she's the smallest in North America, because elf owls are found here. Elf owls and pygmy owls, it's kind of like been a scientific argument for a very long time about which one's technically smaller, because ornithologists can very rarely settle on anything. So it's kind of like, are we going by how tall they are, by how heavy they are, their wingspan? There's a bunch of different factors at play. I think the current agreed upon one is the elf owl, but it seems to change very frequently. Yeah? What are their enemies? Well, what you're looking for is more predators. They don't really have any personal disagreements with each other. It's just kind of a matter of who eats who out in the wild. So their predators would mostly be other larger owls because they're really small and quick, so they could fly away from most land predators, so things like bobcats, coyotes, things like that. They aren't really going to be bothered. Most of the time, if a raptor is consumed by a mammal or something that really can't fly in any way, it's going to be when it's a nestling, because they have nest predators, so things like raccoons and things like that. And then since we did get this northern saw-whet owl in as a baby, we do have what I like to call her baby picture, but it does show off a really important part of raptors' life histories, which is juvenile plumage. So when baby raptors are kind of fully grown, they can fully fledge but still look way different than when they are going to when they're actually ready to breed. So this is what she looked like when she was about a year old. The other educator likes to say that they look kind of like a caramel macchiato. I'm not a coffee person, so I just have to trust her word on it. So we can pass this around if you want to get a closer look. But juvenile plumage is really important because it basically tells other adult northern saw-whet owls, like, at that age, she was ready to be out in the rural world on her own, but she wasn't really ready to like have a mate or anything like that. She wasn't ready to raise chicks. She's kind of like a teenager. And then northern saw-whet owls, because of this, it is migration day, they have kind of what we like to say is a very weird pattern of migration, because it's very much still being studied, but the patterns of migration are very almost erratic and random, it seems like. So some of them migrate sometimes, some of them migrate other times, some of them don't migrate, some of them migrate every single year. It really just seems kind of like a individual choice almost for these birds. They are very capable of staying in Wisconsin year-round and being residents, but some of them around here do migrate. And when they migrate, the ones that choose to make really long migrations, even across like huge water bodies. So people have been sailing boats across like Lake Michigan, for example, which is right outside. And people have seen very small owls. These are kind of like old literature, so it wasn't an exact identification. But very small owls have landed on boats while they have been out in the middle of very large lakes. So they cross very large water bodies when they do choose to migrate. All right, any questions about our northern saw-whet owl? Yeah?
Do they come in any different colors?
That's a great question. It's, do they come in any different colors? So all birds generally have like a range of colors that they can be. Sometimes certain birds have like morphs. So there's things like, if you see a Kreider's red-tailed hawk morph, it's going to be like almost white in color. But northern saw-whet owls all tend to be in this range besides their juvenile plumage. Yeah?
How long is this owl wingspan?
How big is its wingspan? It would be about like 1.5 feet, 2 feet, depending on the exact bird and the sex especially. Any other questions about our northern saw-whet owl?
What about lifespan? How long do they?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the lifespan of a northern saw-whet owl is going to be like 5 to 6 years out in the wild most of the time because they have other predators, so things are going to pick them up really easily. This one specifically is about 3 years old, turning 3 this year. So captivity can actually double or even triple a bird's lifespan. So because they don't have any natural predators in captivity, we keep them all separate for their safety. And then they also have like routine medical care, and they have a constant supply of food. So if you look at our American kestrel who we brought out, he's actually coming up on 10 years old this year, and they only live to be about like 5 or 6 out in the wild. So he's about doubled his lifespan. All right. Well, I'll stick around for questions a little bit after, because I do have a fair amount of time for it.